Good afternoon. This being a committee as a whole, I'm Baltimore City Council President Nick J. Mosby. Today, we're going to hear City Council Bill 21-0172 and City Council Bill 21-0173 and City Council Bill 21-174. Today, we're joined by our Vice President, Sharon Green Middleton, Chairwoman McCray, Chairman Conway, Council Member John Bullock, Council Member Chris Burnett, Council Member Ryan Dorsey. We're also joined by Chairman Yitzi Slifer, Councilwoman Felicia Porter, as well as Chairman Costello. From the council office staff, we have Legislative Services, Mr. Larry Green, who's going to be quarterbacking us today. We also have Nikki Thompson from our office, as well as Matt Stegman. From the mayor's office, I see Natasha Mayhew, Nina Themelis, Director Kearney. I see from the law department, Victor Trevela. From housing, I see Stephanie Murdoch. I also see, I don't think I got you in there, Odette Ramos as well, Councilwoman Odette Ramos. And then from finance, we have Mayor James on. Also from council staff, we also have Elena DiPietro. Sorry, I'm just jumping around. It's different if you guys are all sitting in front of me, but as the windows are popping up, the boxes are changing. But I also see Elena DiPietro from the law department. Also from a council perspective, we have Nathan Poole and Lucy Font. I believe I've gotten everybody on. If I did not, please put it on my head and not my heart. But I wanted to mention everybody on the call today. The purpose of today's discussion is for us to literally go over these three really, really important bills. We wanted to ensure that not only from a council perspective, not only from the administration perspective, but also from the community perspective, that we were able to go through the bill and understand the bill as the bill was intended and written, and ensure that we got ahead of any misconceptions or misunderstandings between the three different bodies. This is a really, really vital bill, package of bills that we see as consequential to how we move forward in the city of Baltimore. We've constantly talked about the importance of not just spending money in this once in a lifetime opportunity, but investing money, particularly investing it in the citizens and the communities that have been disproportionately disinvested in for far too long. And that's really the undertone and really the motivation of why the legislative package was created. There's three separate bills, but we're going to talk about them in conjunction today as a package. I think that many people look at this package as the dollar home package. And just to kind of go over a quick overview, we understand and know that in historically redline communities, it's those communities that we see the blight, we see dilapidated structures, we see vacant homes. We also know that there's many folks that live in those communities and have lived in those communities that should have the same level of service, the same level of care, and the same level of growth in their communities like others have seen. When we look at East and West Baltimore, and there's been studies and been reports that have been out there, you can see places where homes were built at the same exact time by the same exact builder with the same exact material. And when we look at their appreciation values to the lack thereof in these communities, that is what is kind of the root of some of the concerns and issues that we had in those places. Look, if you're a middle class owner of a property, typically your biggest investment and your biggest access to growth and equity is through your home. Well, when that community has been, again, disproportionately disinvested in for decades, historic disproportionate disinvestment, we understand and know that those things create a tremendous amount of issues for those communities. So no longer are you able to tap into your equity that's built up into your property. No longer are you able to maintain and sustain your property. And as that continues to happen, and as things like folks leave in the community and vacancy increasing in the community, it only further exacerbates the problem that we currently see today. So one, this is an issue of like building back our communities in a responsible way, because we know it's these same communities through initiatives like the Opportunity Zone and just the trend of where real estate is going at in this country. It's these communities where we're getting a tremendous amount of population loss, but also a tremendous amount of real estate activity. And the expectation is over time, uh, we will see these communities blossom and grow. And again, the underbelly, the motivation of these particular bills is to ensure that the folks that have been dealing with the crime, the grime, the blight in those communities are also the ones that are at the table that can take part in the growth and equity of those communities. So the Dollar Home program is really focused and centered around providing opportunities for legacy residents, and we'll explain the definition later, to provide them access and a conduit to home ownership. Because again, we know that these communities will grow. Why not do it in a responsible way to allow the folks that have been dealing with the issues of disproportionate amount of disinvestment? Why not allow them to grow with it the fastest? We understand and know that that's important because when we look around the country, many of the same type of communities were in the same type of predicament and situations. Unfortunately, what we saw in those communities is the legacy residents were displaced. Another key factor that is kind of sitting at the belly of all of this is Baltimore is a very uh, rent high market, meaning there's a tremendous amount of rental units. And what we know is more than 50% of our residents pay more than 35% of their monthly income to rent, right? Which is problematic. We know that in the conditions where they're spending $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 for rent, they could actually have a mortgage in a better conditioned home for 800, 900, or $1,000. Again, not only saving money on a monthly basis, but also growing equity to create generational wealth in their communities and for their families. So that is at the core of what we're talking about here as it relates to taking this once in a lifetime opportunity and ensuring that the city of Baltimore, as our city continues to grow, that we also do it in a very responsible manner. When people say, well, Nick, the city's not growing because the last census, it showed a decline in population, how that is true. But if you look at the real estate transactions that have taken place in Baltimore, particularly over the course of this pandemic, or we look at even last quarter, I believe Baltimore City did around $483 million in real estate transactions and ranked us about 20th in the country. So people understand and know that this is a hot commodity as it relates to the real estate market. And folks all around the country are investing in our communities and investing in real estate here. And I think that it's incumbent of this body and the leadership of the city to ensure that, again, our residents who are in these markets, that have been in these markets, that have been dealing with the disproportionate amount of disinvestment, that we invest in them. And in turn, that directly turns and invests in the city. When we're able to take a non-performing asset that's not bringing in any tax revenue and turn it into a performing asset and provide it to a resident who's been here, who's been living with the conditions that are byproducts of failed policy and the disinvestment of their communities, we understand and know that that is going to be a residual return of investment for our city, but also more importantly for our communities, and then even more importantly for our residents. There are two other bills that are tied directly into this that makes it the entire package. One is a repair bill that provides $25,000 to folks that are living in the communities in which we've outlined and that we're talking about to properly restore, repair their roof, windows, doorways, porches, whatever. Again, back to the original example of the same house built at the same time by the same builder. You know, one has a appraised value of 350,000 in a white community. The other, in a historically black community, a red line community, has the appraised value of something significantly less. less as it relates to appreciated value in that, less as it relates to the ability for someone to take money out of the home to continue to maintain and repair the home. So when folks go in and they buy a house for $1, and we're going to get into the mechanics of how that process works, and we're going to all leave here today understanding and knowing how it works, because it's important for us to get ahead of any misconceptions or any miscommunication around it. But when someone goes and purchases that home, now they have a $25,000 that's going to reduce the principal amount of that home. So many people say, okay, it's great to get someone home for $1, but it's not going to appraise. So the $25,000 is intended to go and to support and help them. So say if a build out costs $140,000, in that instance, they would actually have a principal of $115,000 for that particular house. But it doesn't just stop with the dollar homes. It also goes for the neighbors on that particular block and in those particular communities, because we know as we lift up the community, as we're able to strengthen up the fabric of all the homes around that new house, the better outcomes we're going to see as it relates to turnaround community. And these are communities in which folks have real estate transactions, folks are coming and invest. We just want to ensure, again, that we're not displacing folks. And for the folks that have been living there, that have been owning there, that they can have some access to some level of maintenance and repair, that because of the disproportionate amount of disinvestment that the city, state, and federal government intentionally did in these communities, that at least they can have access to certain monies to build up. And then lastly, we have another program for our seniors. We know that they are targets for reverse mortgages, and a lot of times they get into a lot of loopholes that ultimately force them out of their homes and creates a tremendous amount of housing insecurity for our most vulnerable residents and the folks who should really age in place, but unfortunately, in many circumstances, they cannot. Now, this program is targeted to be citywide. However, we know in the same communities that were historically redlined and that we're talking about with the other two initiatives, there's a disproportionate amount of our seniors that fall accustomed and attract to those issues around the reverse mortgages in those communities. So that is the package. The intent of tonight is for us to literally go through all three bills, have council members sit there, ask as many questions, so we're all on the same page as we leave here. The administration has provided some reports. The goal of this was to be just a work group for us to kind of all understand, so that even the agencies could understand. So we did not require the agency to provide any reports. We have some stellar agency heads and some stellar agencies that were able to get reports in by today. But again, today is just for us to all go through the bill to ensure that we get ahead of any misconceptions, so we're all on the same page when we leave here tonight. And then lastly, we're going to definitely open it up for public testimony to ensure that the general public can provide us any questions, concerns that they might have, so we can take that back as a council and have additional work sessions. So that is the point of today's discussion. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to the council office's legislative director, Nikki Thompson, to go through each bill. And then in turn, we're going to open it up to the floor and we can talk about any questions or concerns associated with the particular text. Nikki, if you're okay with it, and I'm going to let you kind of lead that effort while we're going through the bills, it might make sense if there are specific questions for folks to raise their questions there. That way we can just kind of have a open flowing working session. Is that okay with the members of the council? You guys okay with that? I think that that'll be better than waiting all the way towards the end and then going back to this particular word or that. So it's going to be literally a strong working session where we go through the bill, we understand what the bill is, and we move on from there. So at this point, Nikki, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Council President. And if possible, Director Green, can you make me a host so that I can share my screen so that we can see the bill language, so that everyone can go through it? I know all the council members, you have received the language from the packets, but sometimes it's easier to have it available for everyone to see if that is easier for the council members.
Okay, Ms. Thompson. Completed. I believe you're muted, Ms. Thompson.
Hey, Nikki, we can see you, but we can't hear you, Director Thompson. For some reason, it's not allowing her to unmute. Larry, do you have the ability of unmuting Nikki? Maybe take her
Okay,
off.
Mr. President, I just unmuted her from my screen.
Nikki, can we hear you? No, we still can't hear you. That's strange. We could hear her before you put her in control. Maybe if you take her off. And let's try again. And did we elevate Commissioner Kennedy? I just saw a text.
Right. Yeah, right. Change role. So go to McCray, go to anybody McCray and make her presenter first. Right click. Right click on McCray. Change role and make her presenter.
For the general public, sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty. The next presenter is having some issues being unmuted, so they're working it out. And as soon as we finish, we're going to turn it over to Director Thompson, the Legislative Director for the City Council.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you loud and clear, but we could hear you before until we threw it over to you. So.
Yeah.
Should we try not to share and I can just go through the legislation if that's fine since the.
I think to be fair to the public, I think it makes sense for us to try to get it up there, Nikki. So we're going to try to work on that right now. So we're going to try to do it again, okay?
Try it again. Go to Nikki's name.
I think our pain of a couple minutes is going to be better than the excruciating pain of a couple hours trying to follow you while you're talking, as opposed to looking at it as well.
Right click. Change role to presenter.
And Alice, if you can hear me, or Stephanie, as soon as they work on their end, we'll make sure that we get you elevated, Commissioner Kennedy.
Hi, Nikki. We made you the presenter again.
Okay, I'm gonna try one more time. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, see you, and see the document. Now, Mr. Green, also, if we could elevate Commissioner Kennedy. Nikki, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. So good evening, everyone. And to begin again, Nikki Thompson, Director of Legislative Affairs for Council President Mosby. And first, we are going to start with the first bill, the largest bill in the House Baltimore package, which is promptly titled the Baltimore City Urban Homesteading Pilot Program, but is more commonly referred to as the Dollar Home Program. So to begin, some major points that I want to cover in this legislation specifically, because there are so many other pieces of the other two that tie in. I'm going to make sure we cover eligibility because we've received a lot of questions about eligibility, the program structure, and then some protections that we have put in place to the extent of the council's authority. But we know that that's going to be an area where we're going to have to be consistently diligent regarding consumer protection. But we have definitely considered all of the information and expertise that we've gotten about consumer protection. We've included as much as we can, but when I go through it, I'll also explain why it's to the extent of the council's authority. So to begin, we have the definitions section, but I'm going to go straight to the legacy resident definition. As Council President Mosby first mentioned, a legacy resident is defined as an individual who's resided in the city for a period of 15 continuous years prior to January 30th, 2022, or at least 15 years prior to moving out of the city subsequent to a foreclosure, short sale, and that language was specifically taken from similar legislation at the federal level introduced previously by Senator Warren around homeownership. We noticed that there are significant numbers of families that lost their homes during the foreclosure crisis. You see the years 2001 to 2008. And so we are trying to have as comprehensive and inclusive of a definition of first-time home buyer legacy resident as possible. I also wanted to point out that we use the term principal residence as the defining term of residency, because we understand that this is a very transient population. These are going to be folks who move from places to place. So we want to be, again, as flexible as possible to try to get as many residents who would be eligible within that 15-year mark as possible. And so some of the legal requirements of documentation, we've got a lot of questions about that. How do you prove residency? Simply most documentation that you would have your voting registration, driver's license. But again, we're going to be erring on the side of understanding that this is a very transient population, and we're going to do all that we can to make sure that they can provide documentation of that time period. Moving further into eligibility. And I know we had a lot of questions about designated impact areas, but I'm going to go back to that once I get to the certain sections of eligibility. So please hold questions if you see me scrolling past that part. Okay, on to program eligibility. The only requirements that we have for an individual to be eligible is that they're obviously 18 years or older, a legacy resident as we previously defined, a first-time home buyer, if they're currently leasing a property, so if they're currently renting a property, a lease showing that they are renting, and also the ability to afford the materials, et cetera, which actually is more so making sure that they're compliant with the things that they'll need to be able to finish out the repairs, et cetera, which is a further requirement once you receive the property, that you start the repairs and certify that you can complete the repairs in a certain period of time. Moving further into designated neighborhoods and why this is important. A lot of the comments that we have received is making sure that this is going to be directly targeted towards city residents that are in areas that need the most service. So, and not to developers, not to just anyone who can prove their residency. So we further narrowly tailored that 15-year legacy resident requirement to those who can show a 10-year continuous period in a designated neighborhood, designated impact neighborhood. And those designated impact neighborhoods are directly from a map from the Department of Planning that when we overlaid it with the map pretty much of the white L and the black butterfly, it's pretty much those designated areas. However, this is a map that we can consistently point to in the code, and so that's why we chose this map specifically. Any questions or anything about eligibility before I move forward into the program structure? And one more point, since we are here, also eligibility includes individuals who are city workers and they've worked at the city for at least 5 years. They're eligible for the program as well.
Director Thompson, I have a quick question. If you
Yes.
haven't already done so, can you have somebody from your team while you're presenting just send us a link to the map that you're utilizing?
Absolutely. And if there are any other questions, because I can't see since I'm in share mode, so please feel free to call out my name if you have a question.
Yeah, if you guys want, if any council members have questions, please don't hesitate to just speak up, as well as staff.
Another point that's really important to note is that another piece of prioritization that we have included is if the department receives multiple applications for the same property, then priority is given within the existing requirements that we've already laid out to someone who is a first-time home buyer. If they have a household income at or below 80% of the city's average AMI, which is around $79,000 for a family of 4, and is a housing voucher participant. So even further within the program requirements, we have further prioritization for those that we're really trying to make sure are served by the program. If there are no more questions, I'm going to go on to the program structure.
Quick question.
Yes.
And we may or may not know the answer to this, but I'm really curious. Do we have a sense of how many people roughly would be eligible for the program given the certain parameters?
Yes. So we did. Oh, actually, is it okay for me to toss it to Nathan Poole in our office? He's actually
No, totally, Nikki. I was going to do that. Nathan, are you on?
Okay.
I am here, Council President.
I think Chairman Conway just talked about the eligibility. Could you talk about some of the statistical analysis you were able to uncover associated with folks that would fit into the eligibility requirements that we developed?
I certainly can. I'm just bringing it up right now.
And I'd love to throw another question out there while you're trying to answer my first question.
Sure, go ahead.
Given we know we've been seeing folks leave the city, specifically middle-class Black folks, does this at all take that into account? And just something to think about.
Yeah, so the areas that we're talking about have seen the largest amount of decline in the period of decline in Baltimore. So that's why, one, property value has gone to an all-time high there. That's why it's partially why it's so sought after from folks out of state, developers, speculators. But that's why we want to ensure when we use the term like growing the city responsibly, we know that folks that have been living in those conditions based off of the disproportionate amount of disinvestment, that those residents have the access to the properties through this mechanism. So that's why these particular areas were identified.
Okay, so this is to answer Councilmember Conway's question. In my initial analysis, I found that this is all based on 2019 figures, but there were roughly 191,292 households that would be eligible. Now, that doesn't factor into how many residents could be eligible based on the 15 and 10-year requirements as well. I know I did calculate that. I'm having trouble finding it right now, but I'll send it in the chat as soon as I find that. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
And there's also a requirement, I'm not sure Nikki's gone over that, to add in city workers under AMI, a certain AMI perspective. They'll be part of the pool as well.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yep, floor is yours.
Yeah, so I believe I heard 191,000 households. Was that correct?
It was actually 200, 191,292, yes.
I mean, that's just about the entire city.
Well, I mean, that's the point of the program. We got a tremendous amount of renters in the city. So if you heard me earlier, Baltimore is a very rent-heavy locale, and it's kind of interesting because of the price point in which you can purchase real estate here in the city of Baltimore. Many of our renters are paying more than 35%, more than half of the population is paying more than 35% monthly just in rent alone. So this won't tackle that problem, won't end the problem. However, it's a step in the right direction.
Right, so that amount of population is fitting under that poverty line?
Well, it's not defined by poverty, but the eligibility requirements that we spelled out earlier.
Okay.
Minus the 15-year residency consideration, which you can't tell with the demographic data necessarily.
Correct, but we know that's a tremendous amount of opportunity for a tremendous amount of, it's a limited opportunity for a tremendous amount of people.
And if I could add one more thing, Council President, like I said, that is a very high figure, and I did try to estimate it with the other requirements. And I'm going to put that in the chat, so that number of households is going to decrease significantly after I put that in there as well. That was just a major umbrella to try to figure out what the total population is in the city.
And one more point for clarification. Can you tell us how many households we estimated that, just so we know there's 191,000 households eligible, of how many households, so we understand the proper proportion of the city that's eligible?
Yes, absolutely.
Nathan, any other questions before I move on into program structure? Okay, so on to program structure. To begin, we are leaving a lot of room for the agency department heads to provide their expertise. So, where we begin this program, the rules and regulations specifically of how the program will be rolled out and administered, how we'll make sure that those who are coming into the program, applicants, are hooked up with the proper housing credentials, housing counseling credentialed agencies. We're definitely leaving a lot of that expertise up to the department to actually fill out. I want to begin by also thanking the department of our Department of Legislative Reference for pulling together this wording and this language purely from watching the hearings from 2017, 2019, and going in the archives to pull out what was originally the program during the Schaefer years. And so this is our attempt to kind of put that into legislative language existing today, but also being mindful of some of the pitfalls that have been discussed over different iterations of conversations about this program. So just really want to give thanks to them for pulling that together, basically just from listening to and reading the archives. So pretty much how this will be set up is while the lease for the actual property will only be for $1, there will also be the program participant will also have to select contractors to complete the repairs on the property, and then the department will also be responsible for clearing the debris, the trash, other refuse. But then the execution of the lease is going to be similar to what is commonly described as like a drawer, because the funds will be put in escrow. And so the participant will have the deposited sum, and that's equal to the repair estimate, because again, we're only leasing for $1, and that'll be provided by the department into an escrow account with a financial institution. Obviously, that's insured by the FDIC. I think it's really important for us to note here that going further into describing like which particular financial institution you would get this type of funding from is beyond our scope as the council. So we are really trying to do as much as we can to ensure that folks are receiving the best types of financial tools possible, but also staying within our purview as a council, because we can't be so narrowly tailored to tell you exactly where to go to receive that funding. But as the work is completed and approved by the participant, that's something that's really important to note, that again, the work has to be approved by the participant. The department then will will disperse the funds to compensate the contractors. Now, if the participant chooses to complete those repairs by themselves, then they would still have to get the department's approval, and then that would be deducted from the cost of the repairs of the total funds deposited in the escrow. Finally, within 6 months of executing the lease, which is actually the finished product, you have to begin the repairs on the property. ultimately obtain a certificate of occupancy, because these are supposed to be owner occupied, and then finally make the property the participant's principal residence. If there are any violations of the terms of the lease, then that's a default under the lease, resulting in termination and the property coming back to the city. But at the end of the lease term, the department has to conduct a final inspection to ensure that we are 100% solid that this is going to be a good investment for those that we're trying to build generational wealth from. These are going to be first-time home buyers. A lot of instances going to be their first time interacting with a lot of these processes. So we are, again, trying to build in as much of a safety net as possible. And we also have included a extension ability for you to appeal if you're a participant and you haven't been able to meet the requirements. We allow for you to submit a request to be able to have that reviewed so that you can continue to stay in the program.
I have another question. Just so I understand properly, the requirement to within 6 months make the property participants principal residence, does that require they live in the property?
Yes, because we are requiring an owner occupancy certificate as well. So,
But the aggressive 6 months is just to ensure that there's a check-in. The idea is that some of these properties will take 12 months, some will take 18 months. But that's why we have the extension that's also built in there to ensure that there's at least a 6-month check-in to ensure some level of progress associated with that particular property.
So this wouldn't be necessarily, we're not expecting them to have the home completely renovated and living in the
It
home.
would be great, but if they
Right.
don't, there's the
Before check-in.
extension language in there. This just forces us to at least have that check-in about where they are with the property.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
And I guess real quick, Nikki, before we move on, I'm not sure if there's any questions, but I want folks to really understand and know what the $1 lease vehicle means. The fact that that doesn't just give you the property in perpetuity, that you have to go out and you have to have already been qualified for one of the programs that fit inside of that financing eligibility, prime or below, fixed 30, 15-year mortgage. Those are the things that you have to bring to the table. And from there, the one thing that I've been really stressing to folks, because people are saying, okay, well, Miss Susie can go after, she is 55% AMI, she can go get a mortgage, she can go through a first-time home buyers class, but she has no idea how to change her toilet seat. How is she going to do this renovation for this whole house? And the one thing that I've constantly stressed to folks is there's one institution that's always going to protect this interest, and that's the financial institution, the banks, right? So when you go to the bank and you actually secure the pre-approval for this, there's going to be several steps. One of those steps is the bank is going to get you to get a home inspector. So if you've purchased a home out there, you've had to get a home inspector to go and inspect the house for you and the bank, to let the bank know that the bank that this is worthwhile for them to put their money into. So you're going to have your own independent inspector. The difference here is this is a construction loan. So that inspector is going to go and say, Miss Susie, you're going to have to get a new roof because this roof only has 3 more years left. You're going to have to, get new windows because they have lead. You're going to have to do this. They're going to go through the entire house. And they're going to tell Miss Susie everything that she has to do in order to give this or in order to get this house to the standards and code of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. They're going to take that and give that to the bank. The bank's going to look it over, and the bank is going to say, okay, Miss Susie, you can go forward. Now you have to select a contractor that is bonded, that is certified, that is properly insured, have all his licenses with the state, and that contractor is going to look at that inspection report and come up with an itemized list on how they're going to fix Miss Susie's house up. That has to be approved by the bank as well. Once that's approved by the bank, there's an agreement on how the house is fixed up. If you do the roof first, and that was the drawer process that Nikki talked about earlier, and the roof is going to cost X amount. The roof costs $15,000 or $12,000. When they finish that roof, the inspector is going to come back, inspect the roof, and tell the bank, hey, I've taken pictures, I've inspected it. It's to the code of Maryland and city of Baltimore. we can pay them for doing the roof. They've completed the roof. The bank is only going to release out of the escrow, the bank is only going to release that $12,000 associated with that roof. This goes on until the house is completed. There's programs out there, these residential construction loan programs. And one that was really popular is FHA 203K program. So folks can kind of look at how that works for residents. But the one key concern that we've heard is that it's great to give Miss Susie a house for $1, but she doesn't have the experience, skill set, know-how to fix up the home or ensure that she's getting someone that's fixing it up appropriately. But again, between the relationship of Miss Susie, her inspector, the bank, and the certified contractor, those stopgaps are in place to protect Miss Susie as much as possible. At this point, are there any additional questions?
Council President, I have a question, if I may. And my question is regarding, do we know how much the average renovation costs for our city-owned properties? Do we have any data that shows us how much the average renovation cost will be for one of the properties that we own?
Yes, that's a great question. The report is not specific to Baltimore. It's a national report just on with inflation and material costs. But a quality builder grade at a very conservative level, if you factor in $100 per square feet, is a good industry standard. We can send you the reports on that. So when we look at East and West Baltimore, say we take a house that's 1,400 square feet or 1,500 square feet, which is a very typical house in East and West Baltimore. We're talking about a build out of $140,000, $150,000. And that's inclusive of the shell. It's that $100 per square foot is building from the ground up, but that's inclusive of the shell. So remember, we also on this package have the $25,000 repair grant that every dollar house will be eligible for. So the idea is if you get a 1,400 square foot house in Darley Park or somewhere in East West Baltimore, and it costs we say $100 per square feet, so that's $140,000 build out. With that $25,000, that drops you to $115,000. And the key is when you look at the amortization of a mortgage over 30 years at $115,000 for a brand new house that's prime or below, that's fixed, that person in that same neighborhood is going to be paying significantly less for a brand new home than they do right now for rent. So that's really the key of what we're doing here. And I can send you the actual report that kind of spells that out, Chairwoman McCray.
Okay, I look forward to it. I think my other question is regarding the discretion that DHCD has in identifying additional neighborhoods to be a part of this program. What does that discretion look like?
So in the bill, we didn't want to hand tie them to a specific area. We wanted to provide, we didn't want to legislate on how the program was rolled out. Obviously, we want to try to concentrate the most development in areas as quickly as possible, as opposed to potentially sprinkling it around the city. So we didn't want to pick winners and losers through legislation. We wanted DHCD through the information that they have, that they've been working on, to help develop the actual program and how the program was going to roll out in what communities, how many different communities. We wanted that to be something that we didn't want to put in the legislation.
Okay, so just to be sure, they have discretion to include neighborhoods that may be outside of the map that's being shown as long as they fit into the criteria?
No. So this bill legislates that it must go into that designated area that we're talking about. However, inside of those designated areas, no, the designated areas, real quick, Chairwoman McCray, are for that's the eligibility based off of people who can purchase dollar homes. That is not the eligibility associated with where those dollar homes can be purchased. So this is basically going to the city of Baltimore and basically saying, make a registry of all city-owned residential properties and sell them to Baltimore City Legacy Residents for $1. Not just in the areas that we've identified. And the reason we identify those areas because it's the individuals who have lived in those communities with the levels of disproportionate amount of disinvestment that should have access to the program because of the byproducts associated with failed policy of the past. But this does not preclude them from purchasing outside of those designated areas. This is asking the city of Baltimore to create a holistic registry of all residential properties.
That's what I need a clarification on. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I will move on to the next bill.
I have one
which
question.
is- Yes. I heard a question, but I couldn't see.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, Nikki, this is
Oh.
Councilman Glover. The question that I have is, are we going to be able to give these families, potential homeowners, resources or set them up with financial literacy programs to help them even repair the credit so they can get the loans to repair those homes? Is there
Yes.
okay?
So yes, a part of the approval process that we have outlined that we would like to see from the department is the requirement of every first-time homebuyer to go through housing counseling in order to even receive their approval to then purchase the dollar home. So that is something that we have thought about extensively. We know that there are going to be folks that are going to be interacting with this process for the first time. They're probably going to need financial tools to even be able to get to the step of having everything in order to buy the dollar home. And so as much as we can, we're trying to make sure that the agencies who have the expertise and the connections make sure that they are using their due diligence to match every applicant up before approval, before they even start the process of getting the lease with counseling.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I believe there's 12 different HUD certified community-based in maybe 12 or 13 community-based organizations in the city of Baltimore today that currently provide that. And, we will be looking to work with them to support, but also many of the financial institutions have their own counseling programs as well. But as Director Thompson stated, that individual has to go through that process and clear that process before they get access to one of the dollar homes.
Okay. So another thing. So on the website of DHCD, would the public be able to go onto their website, look at the map, and they'll be able to put the mouse over a particular home to identify to let them know this is part of the Dollar House program. You know how you go on the map now, it tells you if it's up, it's a vacant value home, if it's privately owned, would they be able to get on the map and show them to identify exactly which ones are part of the dollar buyback program?
Yeah, so just like the question to Chairwoman McCray, we didn't put that level of detail in legislation because you don't want to kind of do that in law. We just
Okay.
asked the department to make sure that they developed a registry specific to residential properties that the city owns. We would hope that they would utilize a graphic tool, and maybe we can amend later on, Councilman Glover, to say, put in some language around it has to be some type of graphic user interface, interactive registry. So we can work with you offline, but I think that's a good point. It just says registry today, but we can go into the specifics through an amendment.
Mr. President,
Yes, Madam Vice President.
would you also say that this is going to create jobs like at the community action centers that already kind of work with housing with a number of housing issues with residents? Would they be creating more jobs to handle some of the individual discussions and working with each client? Would it be solely on housing and maybe their vacancy value? I know it's a connection there. How is that going to be handled?
So we don't see the program as it relates to the counseling connected to DHCD at all. We see it completely with the organizations like you mentioned. I believe, again, there's 13 HUD certified organizations in the city of Baltimore, and many financial institutions that have these construction programs have their own in-house. But yes, I see a tremendous opportunity there for increasing employment. We definitely see it from inspectors that hopefully are based here in the city of Baltimore. We can work on strengthening language around that, but then also from the construction side this is a tremendous opportunity to create jobs and bigger. It's taking non-performing assets that the city's holding on and putting it in responsible hands of city residents that have been living through the crime, the grime, and the blight of their communities. So we see it as a win-win across the entire board. And not only are we putting it in the hands of them responsibly, but we're putting them in better financial predicaments. Again, the folks that are paying $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 in rent now are going to be paying $8,000, $9,000, $1,000 in a mortgage while growing equity, while saving money every single month. So that is kind of the point of what we're doing here, and we do see it as a win-win opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. If there are no more questions, I'll move on to.
I do have one more question, Nikki. I'm sorry.
No problem, Chair Conlon.
I'd just like to understand briefly, and I'm not sure if you already hit on this, I might have missed it, what our thoughts are for low-income folks being able to get that loan for the remaining 115. How's that work? Is that already factored into this? How are they going to get the money to fix up the place?
So
outside of the additional 25.
Yeah, of course. And that's what we tried to go over earlier. So they would still have to go. I hate to call out programs, but I'll just call out one that's done a lot. I mean, it's very searchable. They've done a lot of work here in Baltimore, but also in sister cities like Detroit and Chicago, particularly to getting folks that are quote unquote legacy residents accessing a pipeline to home ownership. And it's a program out there called like NACA, NACA, right? So a tremendous amount of work. So let's be very clear. We don't expect Miss Susie to secure a house for $1 and then go into her savings or go into her 401k or go somewhere and get a mortgage. The idea is that Miss Susie is going to have to work with a financial institution. She's going to have to show that she's been paying rent for $1,100 a month, $1,200 a month. She's going to have to go through the hoops that financial institution put her through to show that she has that credit worthiness and that it's a mortgage that they can support for her to secure that quote unquote construction loan. And that is when I talked about earlier, the financial institution is always going to protect their interests, and they're not just going to send Miss Susie out with $115,000, $130,000 and tell her find a contractor and come back with a fixed up house, but they're going to be with her every single step of the way. So, I would ask folks to look up similar programs to like NACA that have these types of programs that are already built out for individuals in the communities in which we're talking about. And then I would ask individuals to look up programs like a FHA 203K program, because it really shows you the basic steps of what we're talking about here. How you take a property that's literally a shell and turn it into a habitable space in a responsible way without the skill set of being an inspector or a construction worker.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Okay, on to the City Home Repairs Grant Program. So this is quite simply a grant that we would like to offer specifically for home repairs. They can be for accessibility repairs, general
I'm sorry,
repairs.
Director Thompson. I'm sorry. Did we go over the prioritization, the 60-40% AMI prioritization?
In the last bill, yes.
We talked about that. There weren't any questions around that, because I think that's really important. And I'll just say this before we move on. What we wanted to do was prioritize folks that would be eligible that made the least. We want to prioritize them the highest, because someone in the program can't afford to fix up a 2,300 square foot house, but others may not. So we want to make sure that whatever they're pre-approved for, that they're able to be at the top of the list, so they have access to the most amount of real estate in the city's portfolio at that particular time. And we do that through a prioritization associated with their AMI. I'm sorry, Director Thompson. You can go back.
No, you're fine. And if anybody wants to go back to that section in the last bill, it is on page 8. That would be section 2C5, clause B, where if you have multiple applications, how we'll prioritize if there are multiple applications, if the council members would like to go back to that section in the bill. On to the home repairs bill, which is a very simple grant program that allows for various types of repairs, again, accessibility repairs, general repairs, repairs that are needed for emergency, and even cosmetic repairs. As we've discussed and as Council President has mentioned, this is more targeted towards individuals, not first-time home buyers, but you're a homeowner, you've lived in this neighborhood, and you need assistance with fixing it up for a number of different reasons, as already been described. And so we know that there are already great programs that exist specifically for seniors there within the city already, but some of the additional considerations that we make is this is eligible. Everyone has eligibility as long as you are a legacy resident and you have a prioritization if you're in one of those designated impact investment neighborhoods again. And we also allow for different types of repairs. So an emergency repair is defined very generally as any home repair that, if not made in a timely manner, will likely result in an immediate risk to the health and safety of the home resident or the residents of the neighboring properties. What we consistently hear throughout the community is that you may be doing everything that you can to keep your property up to date, but your neighbor might not be. And so we're wanting to have as broad of definitions as possible to open up and fill some of the gaps that we've seen through some of the existing programs that we have in the city. Additionally, we allow for general repair, which is, again, any home repair or improvement that is completed for aesthetic or non-emergency reason, and then also for accessibility as well. We also allow for, and I'm going to mention this specific section because we have additional eligibility criteria for those who they have a reverse mortgage. Now, generally you have to be 62 to have a reverse mortgage, but this, I want to note, is open to all residents. It's not just for seniors, but we do have another prioritization for folks who have a reverse mortgage. This is the eligibility requirements as well, which is pretty copy and paste. It is exactly the same as from the Dollar House Urban Homesteading Bill. 15 years of continuous residency and further prioritization for those who have lived in a designated impact investment neighborhood for 10 years. If you are at a household income of 80% of the city's AMI or less, if you are a housing voucher participant, and again, if you have an existing reverse mortgage. I'm going to go into the amounts that you are eligible for. So for general repairs, grants up to $25,000. For accessibility assistance, we have up to $10,000. For emergency repair, up to 10, and then for mobile home repair, up to 10 as well. But receiving funding for one particular grant doesn't necessarily, for one particular need, doesn't necessarily preclude you from receiving a grant for a different need or for a different purpose. Again, we are wanting to work with an existing program structure. We want to provide the agency with the flexibility to be able to implement this program the best way that makes sense to them based off of what they already have as existing structure. Because we do have, I want to be very clear, we do have some programs within the city that address repairs, but they're not as wide sweeping as this particular program. So we're hoping that they can work in tandem and together, and that's why we are leaving the discretion to the agency to build that out. And then we have further prioritization to make sure that the grants are distributed in an equitable manner, because as I mentioned, we're wanting to make sure this works with existing programming. So it's any individual that has a household income, at or below 60% of the area median income. If the home improvements are to increase accessibility for them, the elderly individuals or individuals with a disability within the home, that's also further prioritization. To correct building code, fire code, property management, energy efficiency. We're trying to make sure that we have as much as possible, because we want to make sure that we are just giving everybody the resources that they need and the flexibility that they need to address some of the gaps that we've seen in existing programming. Any questions about this legislation before I move on to the list? Seeing none, I will move on. Okay, on to the last bill in the package, which is our Senior Homeowners Grant Program. This is specifically tailored to help seniors who are at risk of losing their homes to reverse mortgage. This legislation came directly from reports that showed that in 2019, specifically, the city of Baltimore saw huge discrimination, quite frankly, when it came to reverse mortgages in a quite predatory fashion. If you were a Black resident, you were 6 times more likely to fall victim to a reverse mortgage in the city. And so we felt it was very apt for us to have legislation to try to get individuals out from under these reverse mortgages for very small amounts of money, as we found from our previous conversations that we had with stakeholders. So what we found was that sometimes folks were losing their homes to reverse mortgages for, not having their homeowners insurance paid up, needing to make some type of repair, or some small, generally related, when I say smaller, not up to the 10,000 or 25,000 that's in the repair grants program, but $5,000, $3,000, if they had access to that, they had been able to either make the repairs, pay their homeowners insurance, pay off whatever taxes or something that may be owed to be able to keep their homes and then pass it on. So we have general eligibility. You have to be 62 years or older. You have to be 62 years of age or older to even receive a reverse mortgage. So that's why that requirement is there. The home has to be your principal residence, and the home itself can't be unsafe or unfit, because that's just a requirement that exists whether we have it or not. So it's restated there. And you have to provide documentation that you're able to pay or secure other grants to pay any costs that are in excess of the amount if you're asking for more than the stated amount that we have, that we're offering, which is $5,000, up to $5,000. Any questions about this legislation? Again, quite simple. It's just a direct grant program.
Yeah, I guess at this point, that concludes us going through page by page of all 3 bills. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the council or staff or the administration?
Mr. President?
Yes, Chairman.
I'd like to just make a note. Nathan was able to do a little bit more digging on my initial question about the number of folks that would be eligible for the program. And he said that there's no perfect data on this, but because with census data, there's a rough estimate of about 17,000 households that have been rented for 15 or more years. So that whittles down that 191,000 significantly.
makes it a little more manageable. Are there any other questions, concerns at this point before we go to public? All right, again, we just wanted an opportunity for all of us to at least leave on the same page of understanding what the legislation is about. We see this is a big package, very consequential, but also I think that we're at a moment in time where we can do something like this and look back in 15, 20 years and know that we did some really good and some special things for folks who thought they could never have access to owning a home, but also owning it in a responsible way. To try to go back on from Freedman Bank all the way to the loans that ballooned back in 07 and 08, right? So these communities have always been communities where programs were never intentionally set up to ensure, well, not never, but where government was not the lead of programs set up to intentionally reverse some of the wrongs of the past. And I think that's exactly what we're attempting to do through the Homestead bill to Councilman Bullock's bill to the Vice President's bill as well. So if we do not have any additional questions from council members or from staff or the administration, we are about to turn it over to the public.
Council
So go
President
on.
Bozeman,
Yes.
this is Commissioner Kennedy. I apologize, my video stopped working in the middle of the hearing, but I do have a question. Will there be additional opportunities? Because I know that we do have a number of different concerns about different pieces and structures within the legislation, both all three bills, and would like to know what the next stage is to work through those concerns about both on the homesteading in terms of eligibility requirements, the number of available properties. I mean, there is limited available properties in analysis and some other pieces. So how to work through and what the next steps would be on the homesteading legislation. Also, next steps in terms of working through some discrepancies we see on the senior repair, well, not the home repair bill, and then also the bill to assist with foreclosure and reverse mortgages. So what is your thoughts on next stages to work through those concerns? Because
No, Commissioner Kennedy, I think that's a great question. So it's going to be the typical legislative process. I think the only difference here is we wanted to do this work session in advance because we know it was a lot of interest out there, and we wanted to ensure that we were all on the same page. You know, whether we agree about it fundamentally or not, what we did not want to happen is misinformation or misinterpretation of the language to be there. So we wanted this to be an opportunity where we could just sit down, kind of talk it out. But the idea is there are going to be additional hearings, additional work sessions to work through those hearings to not only provide testimony from the general public, but also provide opportunities for the administration and for council members to bring forth amendments. So we look for this to be the same exact legislative process, with the exception of we wanted to get out in front and early and have this work session with the committee as a whole to ensure that we were all on the same page. Thank you for that question. That was really important to put that point out there. So thank you. Are there any additional questions or concerns, again, from council members or?
Mr. President.
Yes, Odette.
Yes, thank you.
Councilwoman Ramos, I'm sorry.
Sure, it's okay. Thank you very much for this. I actually had a question on the reverse mortgage piece. I know that we're trying to help folks to get out of the situation. I wonder if we need to go a step further, because reverse mortgage has been a real problem in our city and all over the place, and I think we just need to ban it. So I wonder if we need to go farther here.
I mean, I don't know if that's state law. I don't know if the city can ban reverse mortgaging. I think that's governed by the state. We can look into that from a charter perspective. But the purpose of this program is for individuals who are currently caught up in reverse mortgages. So banning it would not support or help them. But definitely
Understood. No, I understand. I just, you know,
definitely
it's
very,
such a- yeah,
okay. Yeah, but just talking germane to these bills.
sure.
Again, that wouldn't help the folks that we're trying to help in these bills, but definitely interested in working with you to see if something on a state level can be done to do that.
Yeah, and then also just to emphasize that people get in trouble if they're with reverse mortgages and end up in tax sales. So it could be part of our tax sale work as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and so part of that money could go to pay off those tax sales. That's the point of it, because unfortunately, depending on what trap that they get caught up in, is ultimately sometimes the reason that they lose that home. So, and in some work that folks in the staff that have worked in legal aid, we thought that through looking at some of those cases that were coming, not only here, but also that experience that from a legal aid perspective, that $5,000 cap amount was a good amount to kind of start at to really support a lot of our seniors that are extremely vulnerable and find themselves in these positions. Are there any other questions or concerns from members of the council? Hearing and seeing none. At this point, Mr. Green, yeah, we would like to turn it over to public testimony. So if you could kind of go over the instructions with the public, if there are any folks that are interested in testifying today.
All right, if you are interested in testifying, could you please use the raise your hand function, please? And that's how we will recognize you. And I have a couple of folks who mentioned that they had a question. So I have a Sherry Pendleton. Unmute you, and you are unmuted.
I'm sorry, and just one quick point of reference, Mr. Green,
Yes.
each member will receive 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Testimony, correct?
Yeah, if that's what you want, Mr. President, we'll say 2 minutes.
Yeah, we're gonna give everyone 2 minutes.
Okay. Can you? Clicking on this thing, please. Trying to.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Sherry Pendleton, and I stand in support of the bill package. The City Council should unanimously pass the legislative measure. I grew up in Baltimore, and I'm eager to see the city restored to its full potential. The historical practice of redlining has compromised many families in Baltimore's ability to create generational wealth. Many of the vacant properties that taint the city's once vibrant landscape were illegally seized by Baltimore City Sheriff's Office. Illegal evictions add fuel to the practice of redlining because city constituents are denied their right to due process, which is a fundamental right. And it's not happening. People aren't, allowed, the proper process. You're not even allowed to go before a judge before you're evicted, from your property. And I just want to further say that foreclosure doesn't necessarily, mean that someone has to be evicted from their home. If granted the right amount of time, a homeowner can easily come out of foreclosure. But if you're living in a city that practices redlining, which is ultimately corruption, you're not allowed to come out of that status and your property is seized. So when the right to a fair and constitutional bureaucratic process is denied to certain individuals, it creates, almost third world country-like conditions. And earlier, there was a mention of population loss. Well, that's going to happen because people are walking around in the streets with Tech Nines and banana clips with silencers on them, and you don't even hear the bullets when they're being discharged. So at least with this program, people are allowed to, hopefully become homeowners and they can take cover in their own homes. until this wave, of violence blows over.
Excuse me, Miss
Yes.
Pendleton, your 2 minutes is up.
Okay. Okay.
Ms. Middleton, if you could close out, if you have 10 or 15
Yes.
seconds.
Okay. Yes. So I just want to say that overall, this should be a unanimous decision, and that everyone should be on board with this. A lot of people who have lost things in the city, i.e. homes, it's because it was taken from them and they didn't get the fair and the right process, which is the judiciary process, and it just didn't happen. So if you don't understand that, then I mean, just take a look in the mirror. Think about all the times that stuff was passed down to you, whether it's a car, you got a check while you're in college, or you got hooked up at your bar mitzvah or your bat mitzvah. You got to understand everybody doesn't get those type of things passed down to them. So I just hope that you all just make the right decision. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Ms. Pendleton. If you could stay engaged in the legislative process, the council truly love to hear from you. Mr. Green, we go to the next member of the public.
Ms. Stella Kajik, I think I pronounced that correctly. You are unmuted.
All right, thank you. I'm testifying in support of the urban homesteading bill in particular with amendments. I'm a senior political science student at Goucher College, and I, along with a group of fellow students, analyzed this bill for a class we were taking on Baltimore City politics. We researched the outcomes of the previous program and the statistics, demographics, and history of home ownership in Baltimore City, as well as the potential areas for development, sources of funding, and similar programs. We also conducted several interviews, namely with Tonica Garibaldi, who's the program manager of Black Women Build Baltimore, which does similar work as what this bill aims to do, and Lucy Font, who is a legislative assistant in Council President Nick Mosby's office. From the research that we conducted, our main conclusions are as follows: that the method of calculating priority income level should be changed from the AMI of Baltimore City, which includes the average income of Baltimore County, to using the data from the American Community Survey or a similar survey that collects data from the city and the county separately. Average household income is around $76,000 in the county and $50,000 in the city. We think this would further narrow the pool of applicants and give more priority to those who are low income. We also recommend that city financial assistance should be increased to minimize the risk to home buyers by predatory loan agreements, specifically a city-run loan program similar to what was used with the original Dollar House program for those who do not qualify for traditional loans, in order to be more inclusive for those who have low or no credit score. We also noted that most development areas are in previously divested communities, meaning that there is a significant amount of risk to an investment for home buyers. So we advise that the city make further investments into these neighborhoods, such as adding tree boxes, fixing up streets and sidewalks, et cetera, to make them a more attractive area to live in, which was
Okay,
an original piece of the program.
Please, you please, is that it? You make.
Yes, that's it.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Next person, Nika Namandi. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
No worries. It's Nika Namdi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nika Namdi from Fight Blight Be More and the Stop Oppressive Seizures Fund. As this housing package sits, we do not support it. It could be amended to address some of our main issues. One, the eligibility criteria for the programs don't match the residents explicitly that the recitals in the bill say should be given redress. Second, there's no measure that will ensure the houses made available for this program will be affordable to those residents. Three, the designated impact investment neighborhoods puts the focus around developing around assets and revitalization efforts for investors, not based on community needs or repairing the damage done by the racist policies listed in the recitals. And 4, the program doesn't include the availability of low cost or low interest mortgages for program participants. And we can't trust the banks to do that, because though the banks will protect their interests, but they will not protect the interests of the people. The subprime lending crisis should have made that clear, abundantly clear for all of us. I'd like to note that the homestead tax credit has been thrown around or discussed as a shield against gentrification that this program could potentially enable. And we have to understand that the homestead tax credit is not well used in many of the neighborhoods that we're talking about, because there are issues of tangled titles and issues of accessibility to the program. So if the city is going to talk about the homestead tax credit as a shield to gentrification that could happen as a result of this program, if it goes through as designed, the city has to be also about the business of helping people disentangle their deeds and secure the tax credits. But the larger point I'd like to make is that these packages do not really get to the core and crust of the problem, which is that this city must have reparations for housing and community development because of at this point, 500 years of racist practices. And it's not just enough to talk about them in the recitals. We have to have programming that is and funding that is explicitly going to those victimized.
Thank you. Next, we have Kyle. Kyle?
Hello, can everyone hear? Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
So yeah, I guess I also just have a few questions, sort of based off of what the last speaker said. Just sort of wondering, I work with Housing Our Neighbors in Baltimore, and this program seems like it would not meet the housing needs of the 0 to 30% AMI. And I think going off of the point that the last speaker said, still a reliance on banks and mortgages to alleviate like housing insecurity in the city does not seem like a solution that will actually get people housed. I'm wondering about people who, might have been evicted a few times and whether they will be able to access the program due to a low credit score. So I think just sort of, yeah, as the last speaker said, I think this bill kind of doesn't address really the main causes of housing insecurity in the city. And I'm just curious to know how the council responds to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we move on, because I think we're going to potentially hear that the point of this bill is not to address homelessness. Homelessness is a tremendous problem in the city of Baltimore.
That's not what nobody said.
Is critical for us to support, but this for someone that has no income or that is currently homeless and again doesn't have any income to support paying a mortgage, this is a mortgage program. So just want to be really clear. That's not to say that there aren't going to be other initiatives through the council directly tied to homelessness, but the point of this program is not specific to addressing the needs and the concerns of the homeless population here in the city of Baltimore.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that I was on. No one said my name, but I am Jewel Brown, and I don't live in Baltimore. I'm from Atlanta, but I do travel to Baltimore because I am interested in doing work out there as a housing developer. My son and I, we started our company in 2016, and you know, we really want to serve single mothers, providing them affordable housing in a safe community. So I just wanted to share that, and I'm all with you guys for trying to make a change because Baltimore really needs it, and it is a beautiful place. I was just there at the mayor's event last week, and I really just love it there. So I can definitely see the potential, and I wish you all, you know, the best. And if I can do anything to help as a developer and helping these people get their homes in order and remodeled or redeveloped, I would love to help. Thank you very much. Jewel speaking.
Janet Allen.
Yes, hi. How's everybody? I had a couple questions. I wanted to know that will the neighborhoods that you select, will the community members in those neighborhoods be informed that the dollar program is coming to their neighborhood or will be a part of their neighborhood? And also, my concern is what are we going to be doing to address Black flight in Baltimore? When will we design neighborhoods that people from various income levels will be able to live in? Because it seems like if somebody is middle or upper middle income, particularly African Americans, because that's who mostly left Baltimore, what are we doing to attract them back to Baltimore? And what are we going to do to make sure those that are in that position will not leave Baltimore? How are we making the a Black butterfly a better place to live for everyone? Thank you.
Davoni Nobles.
Hello, everyone. My name is Davoni Nobles. I am born and raised in Baltimore. I'm a 32-year-old woman, mom, who recently had to leave Baltimore and come back. I had to leave because I couldn't buy a home here. And I moved in with family just to be able to save for an entire year to come back, and luckily was just able to buy a home. But I just wanted to share some information. I definitely appreciate those who are, you know, criticizing the bill and like pulling it apart to make sure those who really need it get access. But I just really wanted to share, like, my family, I grew up with in a home that was owned and we lost it. And it was I had a very transient experience because of that. And coming back, finally being able to buy a home after a very traumatic experience has really brought value to my family. My own father is now about to move in with me because he cannot afford to rent in his own neighborhoods. I grew up in 21215, and currently he lives in 21217 right down the street. 21218. And he can't afford to live in his own neighborhood. So he's about to move in my basement. So I just wanted to say, like, there's homelessness, there's people who, you know, who have low credit scores, who may not be able to afford to have a mortgage at this time. But there's also low hanging fruit, and there's people who could use some support right now and could be benefits and assets to the city that you will absolutely lose if they cannot find affordable housing and safe spaces right now. So I just wanted to say thank you for the intention and the effort. And I'll be watching. I hope everyone else continues to see how we can make Baltimore the best place possible. Thank you.
Cynthia Gross.
Hi, good evening. So I was glad to hear Council President Mosby say that the bill is going to run through the regular process. So I assume that that means there will be sessions open to the public and more opportunity for the public to provide comment. because when I first read the bill as an individual who purchased her home as a non-developer through the Vacancy to Value program, and I was told the first non-developer to purchase through a Vacancy to Value program, I had some issues with how the homestead bill was written. I didn't see myself or my experiences or the things I went through really covered or protected in this bill. So I'm going to reread it to make sure I didn't miss anything. But just based on everything I went through, I was looking for some more meat and I didn't see it. So if there's opportunity at different points to give comment, then I'm going to do that after I reread the bill, because what was communicated tonight was not what I saw when I first read the bill. So I want to give myself an opportunity to reread it based on the comments I heard tonight. That's it. Thank you.
Claudia Wilson?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Claudia Wilson Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. And I would just like to say, along with others who's previously spoken, other members of the public, I don't support the bill in this current form, but I look forward to the process of making this bill better and stronger. I'm concerned about more programs in Baltimore run by the city of Baltimore that are challenged. And the city has not always been the best steward of these sorts of programs. We do have a lot of challenged neighborhoods in Baltimore, and they need clusters and concentration, like focus. So when people say, yeah, we're going to sell a whole group of houses, and it's like, and there's no clusters that actually move that whole neighborhood forward, I am concerned. I also worry about, as a previous member of the public, I worry about banks and their willingness to finance and extend financing to folks in the Black Butterfly in challenged neighborhoods throughout the city. I think we've seen that consistently not happen. I would also just express some concern. Please don't about some of the agencies like NACA. I would not hold that up as a great example of an organization that has helped lots of people in Baltimore purchase homes responsibly. There are other HUD certified agencies throughout the city that have done an excellent job and walked with them, but that's not also a quick process. It's one that takes time and focus. So there's pieces there. I think the other thing that we have to think about is, sales prices, the appraisal gap, and things that are connected to this, as well as the challenges of reverse mortgages in our city and the challenges that people face. So with that, I also just want to say that I don't think anybody was talking about this being a program for folks who were in homelessness. I really hear that, and I hear that the population, but we still have to, be clear that people are going to have to be able to get a mortgage, and that has been a very big barrier for lots of folks in the city of Baltimore for a variety of reasons. And if we leave it up to the banks, I don't think we're going to get there. So with that, I just also want to encourage the city council. I'm excited that we're looking at these issues, that we're having this quality of this conversation.
If you could bring your comments
And
to a close.
I'm done. And thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All right, sorry, but we gotta go. Anna Rodney. Anna Rodney?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Anna Rodney, and I am the executive director of an organization called Mom Cares. In listening to this bill and reviewing it from what I could have reviewed, I would be willing to support this with some very serious amendments. The information that I heard tonight makes me feel like this process is not set up for the people that it's supposed to target, and that it seems to be a little bit, there's definitely, you have to be prepared to purchase a $1 home, and I just don't see that there being enough support and follow-up as far as making sure the right people have access to these homes. We work with moms who are looking for stability, who are in need of stability, and all of our mothers, even though we work in maternal health, do have issues with housing and would be better off and more stable if they had stable housing. And this package just does not seem to open the door for those people who really need this support, which is a little bit, it's a little backwards, because we're saying we acknowledge that we need to make sure that the right people are buying these houses. We acknowledge that these people have been traumatized. We acknowledge that these people have been victimized by the housing system, but we got to do it right now. Their credit has to be right. We're not going to give them too much help with finding a bank. Good luck. And I think that type of language and attitude has the ability to create a bill package that does not have teeth. And so again, I support the idea. I support bringing people back home to Baltimore, but we need to be a little bit more drilled down into what that looks like, and including more community voice. Thank you.
Eliza Solins.
Hi, I am a resident of the Edna Gardens neighborhood. I actually just came to learn more about the bill tonight. It's very exciting. But as you were speaking about the contracting process, I just had a little bit of feedback as a resident going through some contracting work right now and trying to get that lined up. It sounds like people will be expected to get in touch with certified contractors, but to the point of a little bit more support for people. I know, reaching out to multiple contractors, you get a range of prices. There's going to be a range of problems that contractors might find. And I worry that if contractors know they can charge the city, people may end up needing, new roofs that they may not need, or other repairs, that may or may not necessarily be needed. So just thinking through, I don't know if it would be something for legislation or implementation, but some sort of accountability process for the contractors, just to make sure like the repairs that people are getting are coming through in a timely manner, and in some sort of price range, that there's some sort of supports or follow-up as people are working with those contractors. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Larissa Haywood.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm actually a realtor. I sell a lot of Baltimore city homes, and I think it's a great bill. The verbiage is a little vague, and I think if we can get a little more detail put into place, that would be really helpful. I worked with Live Baltimore, several lenders that actually do the lower credit scores and help clients build their credit. I also run a bankruptcy preparation business through the federal government. So I know there are resources out there. It's just tapping into those resources and making them known, for people knowing that they're available. I think that really needs to be the key when thinking about putting this bill into place. Education is really key. And that's all. I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you. Next, we have Wes Stewart.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Council President, members of the council. Wes Stewart on behalf of Ruth Ann Norton, the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. We're here tonight to support the Homestead program. We think it's important to create resources to increase home ownership rates, to make sure that there's really equity in terms of stronger citizen participation in programs, so that we have home ownership that's really available for also the most at-risk communities to be able to take advantage of programs and resources. And we just have one ask, which is, and we're glad to hear about the counseling programs. We just would ask that all those resources for homeowners are made aware to them, in particular, those who are purchasing pre-78 properties in the city that may contain lead, and just concerned about sweat equity individuals, making sure they're aware of lead safe practices, and also to have certified contractors as part of the work. So appreciate another tool or mechanism to increase home ownership and also make it more available. Secondly, we're also supporting the Senior Homeowners Grant Program in terms of additional resources for reverse mortgage to address really any predatory practices that we're still seeing happen. Also to really reduce foreclosure rates as a means for housing and neighborhood stability, but also to echo the council president, it's really critical for us to really develop and support and foster intergenerational wealth transfer if we're really going to have racial and economic equity in the city. And so all the tools possible to make that happen, including reducing foreclosure rates, are very important to end the cycle of disparity as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to the call-ins. There are 3 call-ins. What I will do is unmute you and you will hear 2 soft beeps. So do the first. Go ahead. Do you wish to testify? A comment? Hello? Oh, he's gone. Hello? Testify, comment? Testify,
Hello?
comment? Hello?
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead,
Hello.
sir.
My name is James Crawford Jr. I'm a member of HUN, and I do not support this bill because it's not going to help the people that we really need to be talking about for generational wealth. If you're making $7.25 an hour, there's not a bank in the world that's going to give you a loan for you to be able to fix up one of these houses. And you have to be making X amount of dollars in order to get a loan from the bank. Also, we're going to be leaving people behind that we should be lifting up. And another point I want to find out about is any of the ARPA money going to be used for the housing project that we're talking about, and can veterans also use this dollar housing and get loans from, if they can get loans, guaranteed loans from the bank on the GI Bill? So those are some of the things that I'm worried about, and especially since we're talking about, developing wealth, that the people who need it the most are not going to be the ones that get it, because a person making $7.25 an hour is not going to get a loan. If you're making $15 an hour, you're not going to get a loan. I'm telling you that's right now. The banks are not going to do it because you are a high risk to them, and they are not out to risk their money on a project like this. Thank you.
There is one more caller that came in. Farmer Chippy.
Ooh. Hey, what's up, everybody? Good afternoon. Good evening. Council President, I hope you're doing well. Thank you very much for this thing that you're doing. This is welcome in Park Heights. We have a bunch of people that are, can you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, we have a bunch of people that are signed up and ready to go. Question though, let's just say Miss Susie's house is all repaired. It looks really nice. Everything's approved. What happens to the vacant lots next door?
Contribution NIH has made during this COVID pandemic. The most visible one, the vaccine.
Okay.
Development of the vaccine, Pfizer, based on 25 years of really hard-won basic science advances. Nobody was really paying much attention to get that approved by the FDA. We were smack in the middle of that.
Mr. Larkin, if we could move on. All right.
Therapeutic.
I still hear Mr. Larry Green.
Yes, yes, sir.
We could put the call on mute. I think there's some other background noise going on. I think there's a private conversation.
Okay.
You can go to the next caller. You know, we haven't answered any specific questions. We haven't
Yes, I
answered
believe
any-
that's it, sir.
Okay, just for the record, we haven't answered any specific questions that's out of traditional council practices, not just here in Baltimore City, but throughout the country, as well as any other legislative body, on the state level, as well as federal level. We appreciate folks bringing their questions and their concerns to us because it does reframe our focus or our thought. The one thing I'll ask is there's been a lot of questions around things that are on our frequently asked question list. So I'll urge the general public, if you have access to a computer, please go to www.baltimorecity.council.gov. And at the top, there's a link that has a link for Dollar House program. Click on that link. There's a plethora of information, particularly frequently asked questions that have many of which have come up through some of the concerns tonight. As I stated to the Commissioner of Housing Community Development, as well as what was stated from many of the callers, this will be a full, very transparent and efficient legislative process for the general public, for the administration, for council members to air out their concerns and their questions through an amendment process. The point of tonight was to get ahead of any misconceptions, some of which still came out after we went over the bill, but that's okay. It's the part of the legislative process that we're willing to kind of deal with to ensure that we're all on the same page of understanding and knowing exactly what the bill is in its current form, the intention, but what it explicitly requires through law. With that, I think that this has been a healthy, just kind of overview hearing. I don't know if there are any other members of the council staff or administration at this point that have any additional questions based off of maybe some of the concerns. If that is not the case, I look forward to adjourning and us picking up on the first of the year. Are there any additional questions or concerns? Hearing and seeing none, thank you for participating in this council hearing. We look forward to have additional hearings, have not been scheduled yet, but will be scheduled in the coming weeks. I hope everyone has an amazing holiday season and a happy and prosperous new year. Look forward to hearing from the council on this particular topic. Thank you, Larry Green, and thank you to all the staff that helped prepare us tonight. Good night, and love you, Baltimore.